All right, well, let's get this going, guys. It is time to kick off our flagship show here, BIM Broadcast. So thank you all for attending. The intent of this show is to basically BS a bit about BIM and about the people behind BIM, building information modeling that is, not Bricks in Motion, which apparently is another YouTube channel that's similar in this name, BIM Broadcast. They have a playlist called that. So I didn't realize that until like yesterday. But regardless, we're going to be having different major people from industry on as guests to just kind of talk about their part of the world of BIM and kind of shoot the breeze for a while. And today's guest actually is Aaron Mahler. So here we go. We got some videos up now. So there's Aaron. And, you know, we're just going to kind of talk a little bit today about some things that that have been going down lately in BIM, in the world of BIM. So first off, you know, we just finished up Built, right? So
we did. Yep. I'm actually not even home from Built yet. I've traversed a couple 100 miles east into New York, and we'll get home next week.
Well, actually, that was just across the lake, wasn't it? Like you took a boat over there, apparently, because that's, I mean, you know, what?
Yeah. We drove down from Toronto to Niagara Falls, and now we're over in Syracuse.
Nice.
Until Sunday. So.
Do you guys want to do the bucket ride down the falls? I mean, that'd be great.
We contemplated the boat ride, not the one that goes over, of course, the one that goes under. But then we saw how wet everybody was going to get, and we're like, yeah, the falls would be great if it wasn't for all that water.
Yeah. Somewhat less climactic, however.
A little bit.
All right. Well, one of the first things we want to talk about, just kind of give a little bit of what's new in BIM. There's a couple things that we saw recently that I kind of want to share with all of you. So let me kind of switch over and show my desktop here for just a moment. And I'm going to flash up a web window for you all. BIM-M, in case you guys are not aware of BIM-M, both Aaron and I have some involvement with these guys. As I found out just recently, they recently had their sort of BIM for Masonry Summit. And we had one of our guys go talk about some of what they were doing, which is actually on that front page right there, the Masonry Unit Database. And Aaron, what were you doing over there at BIM talking about?
I was actually giving a lecture on some masonry projects that I was involved in the modeling side on the design side. And basically, I was talking to the subcontractors who do masonry BIM about what can they or what should they expect from a design model, and what should they or could they expect to be able to use as subcontractors that they inherit from the design side.
Awesome. And what was the outcome of that? Did you guys get a lot of good conversation about what they think they want and what you guys are actually able to provide?
You know what? I thought it was a great conversation. I was actually blown away because a lot of the subcontractors that I met with out there are actually modeling individual bricks and blocks. And a lot of us on the design side say, well, there's no value in that. Well, right. Sitting and talking with them, the value they get out of it is very different when they start talking about filled cells, not filled cells, solid bricks, non-solid bricks, and they're actually doing elevated tickets of each individual wall showing where bricks are, where blocks are, where precast lintels need to go, how that interacts with the walls. And if you follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, the large project I'm working on right now, those very issues are coming up. So I was actually blown away. I wasn't aware the subcontractor masonry side had gotten that far with their modeling.
That's awesome. So I'm looking forward to seeing where they go with that.
Absolutely.
And tied in with that, actually, because the BIM for Masonry team was very closely watching this document, was that written by BIM Form, the level of development documentation. And 2016 was recently released, I believe, up in November at the fall BIM Forum. I think they're releasing the 2017 version of this document. So if you guys haven't been paying attention to this, strongly recommend you go download this document, take a look at it, and begin to implement it into your workflows. And I think some of our discussions today with Aaron might actually tie in a little bit to level of development and or the lack thereof, potentially. We'll see.
That could happen.
It could happen, right? Yeah. So, all right, let me switch back over to showing Aaron and myself here, and we'll kind of, let's see if I can get this pulled up. So I do apologize about some of the logistics here, guys. Hey, there he is. Trying to make sure that I'm getting both YouTube and the webinar again, both showing kind of the same thing. That's a little tricky given that's two completely different systems of transmission. So, yeah. All right, so as we were saying, we were just at Built, and that was quite the fantastic event. If you guys haven't gone to Built before, you don't know what Built is, it used to be called RTC. It's run by RTC Events out of Australia. They've got basically things that, events that travel all over the North America area, as well as all over Europe and all over Australia. And I think they're starting up Asia here pretty soon too, or is that already going?
Asia, I think, is going into its third year.
Third year. Wow, I'm behind on that.
So they're at the, I believe, the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, I think, again this year as well, because it was such a great venue. So I might be wrong about that. I think they're still in Marina Bay Sands this year.
Awesome. So, I mean, guys, get ready for next year's, the 2018 North America. It's actually going to be in St. Louis, Missouri this next year. And if you were not planning on attending, if you're trying to, ask yourself questions like, do I go to AU or do I go to Built? If you're a Revit user, personally, Built is the best conference out there. That's kind of a national level conference and actually international level conference. You get fantastic speakers. So big proponents of that. So by all means, go. Now, when you're going to Built, maybe Aaron would like to throw down a little cautionary warning for you about traveling with technology. I saw on Twitter, Aaron, that you had a little bit of an issue as you were trying to go through the airport.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you're traveling to a tech conference, you probably have a lot of computer equipment with you, and there is checking your bags, there is getting through security with carry-on, and if you're going through with carry-on, I recommend leaving a lot of time. On my way to Built Europe last year, they did make me completely empty out the bag, every hard drive, every cable, every mouse, and it's a bag that when it goes to the radar, it looks quite funky if you've got small computers and whatever else you're carrying with you. Yeah, this time I just goofed up and we had a bunch of very small bags that we assumed they were going to count as one big bag, and didn't go that way.
No.
But, in the end, they were accommodating, so
that's
lesson learned.
Also, when you're traveling internationally, HVE found something very specific out about that. HVE was the donator to the labs at Built this year. And I got to say, this was probably one of the best lab scenarios I have ever run into, despite some of their hiccups early on. It was fantastic. The computers performed so well, but they ran into a bit of an issue. And Aaron, you know a bit more about that even than I do. What was going on? They had some cables they were trying to ship up.
Well, so actually, for those of you that don't know, I mean, the Built community has to do a tremendous amount of legwork to get the labs configured at every event. And if you think about construction scheduling on the critical path, setting up a lab environment when you're on the road is a bit difficult because everything starts from when the equipment gets there and nothing can really be done ahead of time. Getting HVE involved kind of changed a lot of that because since everything is virtual, we can set up the machines ahead of time, but a certain amount of equipment still needs to physically get to the venue. And actually what happened is cables that usually travel with the Built committee, for whatever reason, we think it was just a paperwork goof or something, were basically sent back to Australia. So HVE brought in the virtual servers, and we had all of the Zero clients for the labs. There were no network cables to be found. And props to the HVE crew who took it upon themselves to buy 2,000 feet of networking cable and manually terminate both ends of every cable the night before Built started.
So thank you guys, whoever you are. I didn't get to meet you directly, but you know what? If you're listening to this ever, props to you. That's a pretty monumental effort. I've done some network cabling myself, and that's no small task. So that's
it was
better
a
part of a day.
Herculean effort. Yeah, it was an intense day. Actually, ironically, the hardest part of it was finding enough cable and enough RJ45 ends at the stores. So.
Well, and you would think in a city as big as Toronto that it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but apparently that was as equal an effort as it was just to terminate the ends. So.
Yeah, it was. It was pretty intense.
Jeez. Well, hopefully I can get a hold of some of those HVE guys and talk them into possibly setting up a lab for us at Midwest U, because that was pretty fantastic. If they're interested in that and some more publicity, well, we'll try and get a hold of them on that front. So that'd be great.
Yeah, I really think it's made a positive impact on the labs. I know there were a couple of hiccups that were all actually what I like to call, the people problems, which was just some miscoms about what needed to be installed and all that. But
right.
To have the labs finally running smoothly where we can have people come in and teach Dynamo and stuff that needs to be installed a very particular way and have it all actually work well is something several of us have wanted to see for a while, so I was happy to see it go well.
Did you actually teach in one of the labs?
I did not. I was
Okay.
actually not teaching at Built this year.
Right, you were exhibiting, right?
Well, yeah, my wife and I were going to take this year off from the travel and whatnot, and I was actually helping HVE run their booth. That way they could focus on the labs. So
Nice.
so I came along to help them with their booth. They decided I was their booth babe, which I think they definitely got the worst end of that. And then I ended up teaching one class on their behalf, just since I was there. You know, why not do one if you're going to go? So
Right, exactly. I actually did get a chance to work in those labs, and man, their computers and their systems are just smooth. It was amazing. I've never experienced that. Like I said before earlier on today, it was just the perfect lab environment for that type of venue. If any of you are out there looking for some kind of a virtualization solution, I do strongly recommend you take a look at HPE because they've got this thing dialed in to a T. It's perfect science. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've used it a bit, at a lot of companies that I work with, and I've found it's finally viable to actually use as a desktop replacement, which I'm happy with, especially if you travel or are on the road.
Right.
And I'm glad it's working out so well for the conference also. Right
on. So let's tangent away a bit from Built and talk more about the Aaron Mahler that we've all met, or many of us have met, but a lot of us don't know a whole lot about potentially. So Aaron, how did you start in the world of architecture in the first place?
I actually went to the University of Buffalo, not far from where Built was, and graduated in 2005 and started working in an architecture firm in Buffalo, and honestly knew nothing of 3D models at the time. We took one AutoCAD class in college, and you had to build a 3D model, but it was old school, like Boolean geometry, no smart objects whatsoever. And frankly, I was perfectly happy working in architecture, drawing. I mean, most people don't know this in our community. I drew in AutoCAD for a number of years. I can fly in AutoCAD the same way I do in Revit. And the short version of the story is in 2004 or 2005 when I graduated. There's a project in Syracuse called Destiny USA, and they were recruiting basically everybody they could get their hands on in architecture to work on a large retail facility that the owner had mandated needed to be done in this modeling software. The office I worked for was using Digital Project from Gary Technologies. So that was the first time I modeled a building. It was a train wreck, obviously. For a number of reasons, that project ended up on hold a few months later. And so 40 of us that were working in architecture were out of work. Central New York, the economy is very tumultuous. So I got several other architecture jobs after that. And ironically, all the firms I went to work for after that were doing modeling of some sort. But one firm was in Vectorworks, one was in ArchiCAD, one was Architectural Desktop. And then finally in 2006, I got a job at a firm that was using Revit. And that was January 3rd, 2006.
Nice.
I started my first model a few days later. There was no BIM manager. There was no implementation strategy. It was just hold on to your butts and let's do some modeling.
Hope for the best.
And I'll tell you, if anybody ever really wants to be entertained, I still have that model.
Ooh.
And it is the biggest pile of garbage ever. But, a lot of people think that I'm like a Revit zealot and it's all about Revit. It's always been about Revit. It actually wasn't. Revit was the last platform I started using. So,
well, that's because once you find perfection, you stop looking, right?
That's definitely what it was. The honest to God truth is, I never really intended to get into BIM management. I was perfectly happy to do architecture and work in Revit. And, my wife's very passionate. She's a 15-year licensed architect as well. But the funny thing about using models is if you can't control the implementation, then you sometimes have to work with crap and you want to do a good job. So I actually ended up leaving my first couple of architecture firms over, let's just call it, and everybody on the call probably knows, the internal political strife over, I want to do the work. I don't want to be a manager of technology. I'm not an IT guy by trade, but I want to do the work, but your standards are stupid. So I need to help you change your standards. And unfortunately, when I was younger, that's actually how I said it, which didn't go over super well. So
haven't learned political speak yet, eh?
No, actually, my first boss actually gave me some audio discs to listen to, and
nice.
had said all that stuff like, you don't ever go to somebody and say you made a mistake. You say we made a mistake.
Right.
And so now my joke is I love to walk up to people and go, man, we really messed that up, didn't we? And it's what do you mean we? You didn't do it. I know this.
You know this, right? Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, so that's actually how I got my start. It was
awesome.
I like to tell people I renovated 30-something McDonald's in AutoCAD when I started architecture. Learned a lot.
Nice. Yeah, we actually work with McDonald's a bit as well at CTC. We've gone through and we've tried to help them at least get their prototype put together in Revit, and I'm not sure exactly what they've gone after that, but hopefully they're still using Revit, and hopefully they're still pressing forward. So
I know way more about building content for McDonald's than I should make. The automated beverage center is 54 inches wide, by the way. If anybody on the call needs to.
Ooh, good piece of trivia there. Writing that one down.
Out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So since then, you decided to, you said you didn't really intend to go into the world of BIM management. And I think a lot of people in architecture that I run into that are architects or designers that are now BIM managers kind of had that as the same sort of thing, right? They didn't really plan on it. They're like, oh, I'm going to go into architecture to draw or design or whatever.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be the next Frank Gehry or whatever the case is. But then, but then at some point, some of them have a bent for technology enough that the firm either pushes them that way or they take on the role. And in your case, you took that like to the next level, right? You're not just BIM manager at a firm. You started your own firm. You started Parallax Team, right?
I did. So I started out in Syracuse as a BIM manager for an architecture firm, and they were great. I still talk to a lot of those folks today. And then I got the opportunity, as most people know me, from being at Beck Group down in Texas. Right. They called me up like back in 2010, and they really wanted me to move down to Texas. And they were design and construction, which for me was a really big deal. And we were together for like 5.5 years, but through the revitforum.org community and the Augie community and all the conferences, so many people would, just occasionally email and ask, hey, what do you think about this? And how should we do this? And, it just kind of finally felt like the time was right to just step out and do this. And so 2 years ago, after leaving Beck Group, I started Parallax Team, and I've been helping firms as a small consultancy group since then. Officially 1.5 people.
1.5 people. I like
1.5.
Nice.
1.5.
Nice.
Yes.
Working
on getting. Actually, my cat does hang out in the office, but no, I have a few people that help on kind of a part-time basis. So I call it 1.5. We are looking for person number 2 and 3 possibly in the near future. We're in the suburbs of Dallas, which makes it tricky. Everybody either wants to be in Dallas or somewhere else. Nobody wants to be in the suburbs of Dallas. So.
Right.
A little tricky there.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you and your team then, when you're bringing these new people on, or you're kind of coordinating with multiple people, sort of consulting with them, I guess, to do work with Parallax, how are you guys sort of staying on top of the latest trends in tech? I mean, because you're not users anymore, right? You guys aren't really like drawing anymore. You're helping people implement, and that's kind of a different realm.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, in the last couple of years, we've taken on a bunch of different work. I mean, some of it has been consulting in terms of building templates and building content and doing training and providing training material. But we have actually, with 3 different firms now, or 4 firms, we have actually gotten back into doing project work, whether it's for general contractors or for architecture firms, and one is for a design builder. But, I mean, how would I say we stay on top of it? I'm not actually sure I would say that we do.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's important, right? I mean, a recurring theme of mine is, and I like to tell all of my clients, I'm not an expert in everything. I don't want to be an expert in everything.
Right.
I want to be the best at the things that I know, and the moment it's something that's not in my wheelhouse, I like to just be the person that connects my people to the right people.
Nice.
Let the right people do the right work, and I can't program to save my life. Programming is the only thing I failed in college. And so when people come to me and they say, can Parallax write this app for us? I say, you know what, we can't, but let me send you to the person who can, and you can work directly with them. Or if you want, you can go through Parallax, but we don't want to be a hindrance. And I think it's important to not try to be a master of everything.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree with you. Being a master of everything is a job that I think I have not met a person yet who can be a master of everything. So
agreed.
I've seen a lot of people try and a lot of people fail, but never have seen somebody be actually the master of everything. So
Right.
So then, since you're actually seeing a lot of models, you're consulting with a lot of these firms, what's, just throwing this out there, worst thing you've seen in Revit recently?
I was actually just participating in a thread on RFO on a Revit forum today, and I think it's interesting to me. The worst thing I see is actually not one that's very serious. Some people are like, I once saw a 15-story tall in-place railing family, and I'm like, you know what? It doesn't really bother me. The geometry's accurate or whatever, and it's fine. But in the scheme of design and documentation and construction, there are two glaring issues that always are concerns in construction. One is information is missing.
Right.
And information missing honestly doesn't bother me as much, because if it's missing, it can't get built. If it's missing, it gets RFI'd and then it gets provided. What really scares the most out of me is when information is present but glaringly wrong. And I see that the most when people do the typical thing we all complain about, which is they hide and fake the model.
Right.
And I've seen projects recently where massive items don't align, and by align I mean they're completely different things according to two major disciplines like architecture and structure. And you get into situations where if somebody looks at the architecture drawings, the information is all present and it's all correct. If they look at the structural drawings, the information is all present and all correct, but it's different. And now what you have is the perfect storm of what goes wrong in construction. Mm-hmm. You have a subcontractor that can legitimately say they looked at the documents and they were correct, and they build something wrong, and now everybody's upset. And so for me, as much as this is kind of a recurring theme in BIM, the worst thing I see is, if the model's turned off, I just lose it. If whatever I'm looking at is not from a live model, I don't want to look at it anymore. And that goes all the way down to the inch and a half details. Like it is possible to fully detail an inch and a half detail. You've got your 2D augmentations, but if your live model is not turned on underneath your inch and a half detail, I'm automatically throwing up an alarm as somebody reviewing the model. And there's a chance it lines up perfectly and the detail actually works. And if it works, then we'll give that model a thumbs up after, and we'll move on. But if it's not from the model, we're checking it. Right. That is the Achilles heel of this whole process.
Yeah. How about overridden dimensions? Do you see that a lot in models these days?
I see it. I see it a lot. And what I really like about overridden dimensions, though, is because honestly, that's something you can automate checking for, right? So similarly, it doesn't mean an overridden dimension is wrong. It means it's overridden. Maybe it's overridden and it's the exact right dimension with some goofy piece of text after it, like verify in field. But similarly to the model being turned off, I do run a script, and the moment I find overridden dimensions, every single one gets checked. And the nice thing about it is that makes generating those RFIs much faster.
Yeah,
just
truth.
Go to the dimension. If it's actually the wrong dimension, I instantly RFI it and call it a day.
Right on. So on a tangent direction here, Eric Ziegler wrote in and said, have you actually worked on BIM execution plans, like from the start?
Yes, I actually have several times. I've written 2 for previous offices I worked at. I've written Parallaxes, and it is actually a service that we provide for other clients. Some of my clients are owners and operators and developers, and they've asked me to write BIM execution documents on their behalf, and I have. And I have a bit of a reputation for the standards that I ask for being very aggressive, but I like to tell my clients, and I honestly believe that a BIM execution document that I write asks for a lot in the model because I believe in a lot being in the model. But frankly, I don't like to ask for things that aren't really going to happen, that aren't really going to provide value.
Right.
I've been on the receiving end of a BIM execution document that asked for PT cables to be modeled in a concrete slab and asked for every stick or rebar to be modeled. And I pretty much told them that I was taking that BIM execution document into the bathroom for toilet paper.
Right.
But and I don't think it adds value, not because it's not useful in the model. Of course, we would all find a way to value from that, right? The problem is the people who are doing the installation are not the people you're putting the onus on to build that model. And if you can't hold the installer to building off that model, then having that model doesn't provide the benefit everybody thinks it does.
So BIM execution plans, when you guys are putting them together, make sure that what you're asking for is actually going to provide value. Don't just put BS and spew junk in there because it's something to have to claim, oh, we got a good BIM execution plan. Make sure it's going to have value.
Yeah.
High standards, yes, but garbage, extra junk for the sake of extra junk, why?
Absolutely. And I mean, here's how I look at that, right? Anything that needs to slope in the real world, it needs to slope in the model. You know, within reason. Gravity slope pipes, they need to be sloped in the model because they are the number one coordination issue I see in the field. Sloped concrete, absolutely. Now you get into some minutia. We had a great discussion on Revit Forum. You know, sloped pipes inside a chase wall. Like it's already inside a wall cavity. Who cares at that point? And again, like rebar, you know, rebar is obviously a very big coordination issue. I think spot modeling rebar makes sense. You know, having someone put every stick in a building in America, and I want to put that asterisk there because overseas, rebar is contracted very differently. Here, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And I think that also with, if I'm going to take this back a little bit to BIM, the BIM Formationary Group, they're kind of on the same page, right? They're like, you know, you don't model every brick in the building, but you can certainly spot model some of that brick with some of the content they're providing for the same purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. When I was at the BIM Summit, a lot of the subcontractors are modeling every brick and every block in a building, but again, they are the ones installing the brick and the block. So it's the right person doing the right modeling at the time. And they even universally agreed, like, you know, because I was there, and the interesting thing about that event is one day was design, one day was subcontractors. And I spoke about design on the subcontractor day. But they even universally agreed, look, we don't want people in design messing around with where they think the bricks and blocks go, unless it's part of the design element, of course. Right. You know, obviously, we want it done right, you know, so that the design is fleshed out the way everybody wants to see it. But a lot of them are starting to model every brick and every block. We saw some great Tekla models. We saw some great AutoCAD-based modeling programs that do it. I'm not seeing anybody putting every brick and block in a Revit model, and I'm happy with that. I don't think it'll survive, so, you know.
Yeah. So along with that, then, who's driving the need for that? Is it the contractors, the subs? Is it the owners? Like, who do you see that's actually pushing that level of development forward, that level of detail, actually, I'll call it in this case?
Interesting thing about that, in the cases I've seen where the subs were doing that modeling, it was the subs wanting to do it.
Nice.
It was the value they get out of it for procurement and knowing, again, you know, which blocks and which bricks need, you know, which cells filled and where was the reinforcing going and where were the control joints. I work with a lot of owners and developers about what their BIM standards ask for, and that's a bit of a complicated issue when you get to the construction side, because there's the question of what do they want at the end and for what purpose, but you know, you also really don't want to hamstring, you don't really want to hamstring anybody into not being able to work the way they're comfortable. So that gets a little touchy.
Right. So then you're working with a lot of owners in that case. What are you seeing on their level of sophistication? Are they raising up or are they kind of stagnating? Where do you see them going and what they're asking for and what they're using actually based on what they ask for?
You know, this is a really interesting conversation because the owners I work with are finally starting to come around to at least wanting to ask, what should they ask for?
Nice.
The problem is nothing is changing for those owners or from those owners contractually. And what I mean by that is anybody in construction knows that basically, and everybody in design knows that design does not usually grant construction right of reliance in any of the models provided. Right. And the trouble with that is, and on the design side, I think firms need to be very careful because on the design side, we're promoting to owners, we do BIM, you get this model. This model is awesome. And by the way, everybody who gets this model from us is going to sign a disclaimer saying they can't rely on anything and it might not be accurate and we only produce 2D drawings. Well, so at that point, a general contractor basically has to use a design model at their own risk or has to produce their own.
Right.
At that point, is the owner getting the value they think they're getting out of that model that we're providing in design? So I have sat with owners, the owners that I write BIM execution documents for, I explain this to them and I say, look, I'm not saying you shouldn't ask for a model from design, but if you want to ask from the model from design, the BIM execution documents I write focus a lot less on LOD because LOD doesn't really, you know, blow my proverbial skirt up. I'm not wearing a skirt. It's a metaphor. But
he's actually wearing a kilt. There's a difference, and you guys can look up the difference, actually.
It's true. But what I care more about is for an owner to sit with the architects and the engineers and the GC and have everybody at a table together and say, architect, you will not fake dimensions. You will model accurately. Structure, you can use typical details in your drawing set because that's what you're used to doing, but you will model those typical details correctly everywhere in the building.
Right.
I mean, I'm looking at concrete models right now where I would say, no joke, 25 to 30% of the concrete isn't present in the model. And again, if you're selling that you provide this model as a service as part of design, then what are we talking about here? That's
right.
it's not real. So, I mean, for me, I tell owners, have a BIM standard, stand by it, but also have your construction teams and your design teams together on day one when you explain that.
Right.
And tell the design teams, hey, listen, we're not looking for you to change your contract drastically. And obviously, a GC would have to be crazy to start counting nails and screws and chipboard out of a design model. But yes, make the design team know, person on the other side of the table, going to use your model for coordination. And if you have a problem with that, this is probably not the job for you.
Right. So wait a second. You're actually asking people to communicate?
Absolutely.
What?
Absolutely. I'm a talker. If you can't tell, I'm a talker.
Oh my. Yeah. So those of you out there who don't like communicating and sharing, those might not be the jobs for you, as spoken just by Aaron. Because truth, I mean, the owners, if they want that kind of information and you're not willing to share it, then what's the point of even drawing it in Revit in the first place in some cases? I mean, you get your own internal coordination, but if you're not going to share it.
I mean, look, for the last 15 years, I've been hearing about how design teams are getting marginalized and this whole process, they have to do more and they have to get less. You are the owners of the data, and the data is the commodity. So you have the opportunity to take back control here, but you can't take it back if you say we're the owners of the data, but we won't let anybody touch the data. It's not our risk. And my whole thing is, I understand that. And look, if somebody goes into your model and they goof up doing a quantity takeoff, naturally you don't want to be responsible for that.
Right.
But are you really worried that every single item you put in the model you might have put in the wrong place? Like, put on your big boy pants and let's just make sure stuff's in the right spot.
Right.
It's not that hard to do.
Right. Truth.
So
let's take a couple of more steps back. You said you went from AutoCAD to Gary Technologies to Tekla, or not Tekla. It was a bunch of Vectorworks to
Vectorworks,
architecture,
AutoCAD, ADT,
right.
And then to Revit.
Okay, so what's the next big thing you see coming in the world of BIM? Not necessarily design software, because maybe there aren't any, but just in general, technology for the world of BIM, what are you seeing that's about to come out? Or that is coming out that's not popular yet?
Yeah, I mean, so we saw a demo at Build, and I don't want to be pushing one specific manufacturer's software because contrary to some people's belief, that's not my jam. It's not what I do. But I want to tell you a quick story. Is in 2011, I had to work on a project where we were basically building a model for construction coordination and then pushing that model out for direct to fabrication. And we were actually using the tool that became Autodesk Point Layout. At the time, it was called Get the Point. Mm-hmm. But what we were doing with Get the Point wasn't sending points to the field for layout. It was sending intersection information from Revit to a better steel modeler because, frankly, Revit couldn't model the actual connections and the actual steel detailing that we need.
Right.
So what we did is we built a model in Revit, and we kicked out nothing but point data to, at this time, it was Autodesk Inventor, but I've also done it with other folks who use Tekla and whatnot. And so the idea was the geometry from the model, from model number one, doesn't get transmitted anywhere. The geometry gets thrown in the trash. So we have our design geometry, we use it for whatever, and we send location data down to a fabricator. And what's funny is what Anthony Hauk showed during his main stage presentation about Project Quantum is just that. So if an architect designs a curtain wall facade and it's wavy and it's badass and it's all this stuff, and then they don't focus on getting the mullion geometry, right? Because frankly, Revit and mullions, not that awesome.
Right.
But here's the thing. Can we equalize it so Revit doesn't have to get better at that? You send information about the facade to somebody else's software and somebody else's software models it. Obviously, we need a way to pull it back in so we can finish some simple drawings because it's still 2017. But that, to me, I mean, and that's not just an Autodesk thing, right? I mean, between all of us on the call, I was doing that with text files, like ghetto CSV text files back in like 06. But the fact that we can pass the information back and forth and not rely on any one program to model everything, I think is fantastic. And I think it's going to go that way more, where we're going to start worrying a lot less about geometry compatibility. Because right now, like if you read anything I write on RFO, it's like don't bring in SketchUp, don't bring in AutoCAD, don't bring in because it's all garbage. That's a geometry problem. That's a software and a geometry problem. But bring in a point that says where the chairs go and then let Herman Miller figure out the geometry of the chair, I'm all about that.
Right. Yep. That's pretty cool. Yeah, Project Quantum, when I saw that on Mainstage, that's a pretty awesome tool. I'm excited to see where it's going to go. And it's so early in its development, I don't even think we have access to that yet, right? That's just brainchild of Autodesk at this stage.
Yeah, I haven't seen any access to it. But like I said, with everything else that's come out recently, I mean, with the API in so many of these programs, as open as they are, and especially with things like Dynamo, I mean, you can basically hack your own Quantum in like an hour. And that's coming from somebody that's a programming moron. So, I mean, if you can program, like that door's already opened. You can roll your own and be good to go pretty quick.
Nice. Roll your own. That's nice.
Roll your own.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Very cool. Anything else that you saw it built or any other tech that you see coming through that might be of interest to the listening audience? Quantum
Quantum is great. There were actually a few interesting classes that I took at Built that when the exhibit hall wasn't in session. I was really excited by actually a synchro class that I took. It's scheduling software for construction teams. But what was interesting about it was Greg Demchak, Frame, if you know him on Twitter, he was tweeting about looking at the schedule through HoloLens, which was really cool. And he actually made it so that people in the lab could all bring a HoloLens and get into the model and stuff. And it went kind of well. I mean, obviously, that many people trying to activate their HoloLens at once, there were some technical hiccups. But I've previously seen this demo from Greg in a room where we had like 100 feet in every direction that you could walk through a model while it was getting erected by synchro. It was wild.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and whether you're an Oculus fan or a HoloLens fan or a Vive fan, I mean, for me, that's Chevy versus Ford versus Toyota. Like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The fact is, it's getting there pretty soon, and I'm excited about that.
Excellent. Excellent. So, out of curiosity, I asked you this before, and I went out and looked. I don't know if I found exactly the right channel, but do you YouTube as well?
I do. I do. There's not a whole lot there right now, and it's named kind of poorly, but basically the same name as my Twitter handle. It's just Twice Roads Fool and then the word Revit at the end of it. So all one word. It's on YouTube as Twice Roads Fool Revit. And I occasionally throw up a few training videos that are public, or I show a couple of videos of things that I'm working on. I've got some of my current project in there running around in both Enscape and Revisto. Which are both products that I use that are a lot of fun. So I'm on YouTube. You can catch up with me there. I'm really bad about checking the messages on YouTube. I logged in like the other day when you asked, and somebody had been like, hey, where do I find this? And like 6 months later, I'm answering the comment. So I felt really bad about that.
So don't expect to get a hold of Aaron on YouTube. Certainly Twitter. Hit him up on Twitter.
You can definitely hit me up on Twitter, RFO, email, whatever.
Right.
But yeah, and I'll get better about checking the YouTube channel.
Right on. All right, so I want to take and announce a couple of things that are up and coming, and then when we're nearing the end here, I'm going to give Aaron a 2-minute platform to rant about whatever. We're going to see what that is. I have no idea what it's going to be yet.
No.
Figure this out. So. But I'm going to switch back over here and show some other information about some upcoming events that you guys might be interested in. First off, you probably saw rolling across the page here our Twitter handle. It's at BIM Broadcast. So certainly hit us up there. In future shows, as I mentioned earlier in this show, all of our live comment stream is very likely going to be going through YouTube and through Twitter. So by all means, hit us up there. We're all about making sure we're going to connect you to whoever is speaking here as one of our guests. Also, if you guys are interested in being guests on BIM Broadcast and you feel you want to sit down and chat, talk for a while, please hit me up, let me know. I want to make sure that I give you guys a voice out here and share all that is BIM with everybody else in the community, kind of level the playing field, level the knowledge, and really help us all grow as a whole. And so let me transition here again back to showing a window here. 1 second. Pull this guy up. And what we're going to do here is kind of talk about a couple of upcoming events you probably know about, but in case you don't, let's kind of show this. So Autodesk University just opened up registration like yesterday or the day before. So get in there, right? Autodesk University is also a great event. Now, I mentioned earlier in the show, if you had one to choose, I would choose Built, but you just missed that one. So if you didn't go to that, hit up Autodesk University. You'll see us there. Aaron and I think will both probably be at AU. Aaron, you're going to be at AU?
Probably. AU is usually a last-minute decision for me, but it usually just comes down to scheduling.
Right.
Yeah, both great events. I would be there given the opportunity.
Excellent. And as James Moore just wrote in here in the comments, labs are already full. So classes fill up quick. They always do.
Yep. Yes, they do.
Don't wait. Get in there. So also Midwest University. This is an event that CTC puts on. It's Minnesota Regional. So those of you in the Minnesota area, we are, always looking for speakers. We just opened up our call for proposals yesterday. So those of you interested in speaking, please get us your submissions earlier than later. You get a free pass going to Midwest U. So, don't be shy. You get to go see some great content and teach. That's awesome. It's about the same size as Built, quantity of people-wise. We're a little bit more spread out. We talk a lot about civil information, so it goes beyond just building information. It's also civil and a couple of other techs out there, scanning and other types of skills. But if you've got a topic you want to talk about in a 60-minute class, submit that. Get that going as soon as possible because we are looking for speakers this year with the work of Eric Ziegler, who's on the call today, and the team out there at Mystic Lake where we hold this event. They have a new conference center, and as far as I understand it, it is gorgeous and much larger, so we have room for a lot more classes. Those of you who did not get a class last year, was nothing against you. We had so many classes that we had to make hard choices. And so this year, if you submit, you're much more likely to get in, and so we're seeking that. Also, as mentioned here, Built North America 2018 is going to be right around the same time. It's like the first month of August, I think, but it'll be next year. Plan for that if you haven't already. Get that in your books. Get that a part of your workflows. Get good people going there because it's like the premier BIM talk as far as I'm concerned for sharing Revit knowledge around the industry. And there's a bunch of pre-conferences as well. So if you're not aware of those, take a look at the RTC events page and look at the Building Content Summit, the Design Technology Summit, I believe is what it is, and Data Day. Those are all three very good discussions. I got to participate this year in Data Day, and man, it was fantastic. The amount of information that was shared and kind of taking the Revit model going well beyond it and turning it into big data for BIM. So,
yeah, and if I can, Sean, if you don't mind, I want to jump in there for a second. AU is a great conference, and I like to go for the exposure to all of the different industries, particularly like media and entertainment and what they do. But for me, what's special about attending the Built event is like aside from the class time, the actual interaction with the experts that you get to know on Twitter. To get to finally meet in person a lot of the folks who have been teaching me Dynamo over the forums or over Twitter because I'm like a Dynamo moron, to get to have face-to-face time and the things that come out of those face-to-face conversations is intense.
Right.
And in that regard, the pre-events that happen as well, obviously sometimes you have to make a choice between which pre-event, but I was previously part of setting up the BCS events, and it's dedicated to content, and it's a lot of questions I get from both owners and designers, like, hey, this content is like this content is like this, what are we supposed to do? And there's a lot of interesting conversations in BCS. You're not going to come out of BCS with an answer, like, here's the one way to build content, because frankly, if you're asking me, that's a dumb thing to try to achieve. But what you'll come out of there is with workflows that make it so you don't need that.
Right.
And the one other thing that you and I were talking about previously is I don't worry about my different client standards for content or, my content standards versus somebody else's content standards, because I think the most powerful way to operate is to just start building workflows to migrate between them. And It makes things, honestly, not an issue. You can learn about that kind of stuff at a Data Day or a BCS or, any of those other kind of events. So yeah, all worthwhile for attending.
Out of curiosity, what are your favorite tools for migrating between standards?
You set me up.
Oh, maybe a little bit.
No, I do use the CTC Revit Express tools, and the reason why is I actually have preset settings files for all of my clients.
Right.
And so, and as I acquire new clients, I make new settings files, and then I can migrate from my standard to their standard, and it's pretty quick. But I mean, there's also, in addition to that, there's some other hacky stuff that I think you and I've talked about before that I've done. For doing the few things that the Express tools don't do. I've got like my really hacky journal files that run. But no, I mean, I would definitely check out the family processor is something I use a lot. The shared parameter manager. And that's something I talk to my clients about because they say, well, we have your shared parameter file now and we have ours, and what do we do? And it's not a monumental problem.
Right.
And that's why, like I said, I don't get onto the whole we need one standard for everything bandwagon, because with tools that are available now, you can get around that stuff and not have to think about it every day.
Right on.
So, I love my family processor.
I do as well, man. That thing has saved us from hours upon hours and probably weeks of work, time and time again. So glad it's getting some use out there.
I use it probably at least every other day, if not more.
Right. All right, so we come to the time in the show, Aaron, where I get you your 2-minute 2-minute soapbox. So
nice.
What have you? This is anything, guys, by the way. So when we get to the 2-minute soapbox section with our guest, it's not necessarily BIM talk. It's anything they want to soapbox about for 2 minutes. So
I'm not sure if anybody's going to be left at the end. No, it's really not that bad. I've kind of, obviously I grew up in the 80s and then in the 90s and then obviously today things are very different. And what I find is very different is that for better or for worse, everybody now, myself included, has a platform. There's a way to talk about everything. And the trouble is now it's very hard to discern if and when you read something, is it fact? Is it fiction? Is it slanted? Is it not slanted? And so for me, I mean, one of the biggest issues is, and this does pertain to a lot of my BIM work as well, but I have to constantly be asking myself, is that fact or is that opinion? And as far as that goes, if somebody presents themselves as an expert on something, myself included, is it fact or is it opinion? And so I tell everybody, I tell my clients now, in the spirit of the phrase, you don't know what you don't know, narcissism has to be checked at the door. And like I said earlier, for me, that means evaluating whether or not I think I know something or I actually know something. And I'm going to tell you a quick story. If you know me on the forums, I'm obviously a pretty confident person, and I think I know the right way to do things based on experiences, based on lesson learned. And one day I was sitting down with a guy I used to work with about coordination, and I said, this is how I break up my coordination. He's like, it sucks. I'm like, it doesn't suck, you're wrong. And he's like, yeah, here's why it sucks. And I'm like, it sucks. Yeah. So, and guess what? Now his way is the way I do it.
Right.
But the problem is, in today's society, everybody's got a Twitter feed, everybody's got an Instagram, you've got a Facebook, you've got a social media persona, and there is this narcissism that goes along with that where I can make a statement and I can make that statement true. And because of that, and I'm not saying everybody does it, but I'm seeing it a lot in our BIM community. I'm seeing it a lot in politics. I'm seeing it a lot in media. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes you have to just say, am I the expert? And if I'm not, maybe I need to go talk to the friggin' expert because maybe it's just not me. When you start hearing those interesting phrases like many people say, or I've heard, or whatever, that's when I'm kind of like, really, who are the people?
Right.
And so if you've argued with me on RFO or on Twitter, you'll notice that what I do is just called the drill down for more information. So, well, many people say, awesome, who are they? Let's get them in the room. Let's talk to them. Well, figuratively is crap. Get that out of there. But I would say, like I said earlier, I like to be the first person to put up my hand and say, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about right now. And I think we all need to just kind of check some narcissism at the door. That's my soapbox.
And that, actually, guys, is how Aaron Mahler learns at Parallax. You learn by asking questions. You learn by not always having to be the expert.
And that is what I love about Twitter, honestly. Right. If you don't know John Pearson at 60 Second Revit, he is the entire reason I can even build a Dynamo graph right now. I was like, people used to say I was anti-Dynamo. I said, I'm not anti-Dynamo. I said, there's two things about it. One, I have no friggin' idea how it works. And two, there's some deployment and some maintenance issues, which we will cover in another call. But John Pearson decided he would teach me how it works. And like I said, you have to, before you can ask somebody like or before somebody like John can volunteer to want to help you learn something, you have to be willing to put up your hand and say, oh, I don't know how to do that.
You have to be teachable.
If I just say, I know how it works, I just think it's crap, well, no one's going to teach me anything.
Right.
So,
truth.
By the way, if anybody wants to teach me Tekla, throwing that out there.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, Aaron, for your time. I do appreciate it. I know that it's an hour out of your day, so I thank you for coming on here and sharing your knowledge and your experiences with us. Look forward to possibly having you as a guest again in the future at some point, maybe. So
absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been great. I'm looking forward to future broadcasts.
Excellent.
Where I will watch instead of being here.
Well, right. Exactly. Yeah, watching them. Right. Exactly.
Totally.
All right. Perfect. Well, everybody, thank you all for your time today, and we are looking forward to seeing you all as well on future broadcasts. If you have not, subscribe to our YouTube channel. I know that I got a comment there from an individual that said Aaron's audio was not coming through. We will get that figured out. It was coming through. It was coming through on the webinar, the go-to webinar, but apparently it was not going through. Maybe my studio recording system isn't actually capturing your audio, which is a bummer. But I do have this all recorded, guys, so all of this will get uploaded with Aaron's audio to YouTube later this week, or later early next week, because it's Friday today. So we'll see as soon as we can get that up there. So again, thank you all. Leave us some feedback here through the go-to webinar system. Let us know how you feel we did. If you like what you heard, if you didn't like what you heard. That's great. Let us know that too. We always want to improve what we're doing for you. So thank you all, and have a fantastic weekend. We'll catch you all later.